Hi, I'm Lynn Cornell, and welcome to Journey Through the Bible Verse by Verse. Grab your Bibles and follow along as we study through each book of the Bible, verse by verse and chapter by chapter. Now, I'm using the Holman Christian Standard Bible, so if you're reading from a different Bible translation, the read is different, but the message will be the same. We're going to continue in our study through the 27th chapter of Matthew. Now, Jesus has just had really the official trial conducted by Pilate, who had given him his execution order, knowing that Jesus was innocent. But because of political pressure, meaning from Pilate's standpoint, not that he cared about the Jews, by the way, he couldn't afford to be in trouble with Rome. And so to keep the Jews happy, he gave the order reluctantly. Now, verse 27, then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into headquarters, meaning they're taking him from Pilate's judgment seat. It said that the governor's soldiers took Jesus into headquarters and gathered the whole company around him. They stripped him and dressed him in scarlet military robe. They twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, placed a reed in his right hand, and they knelt before him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they spit on him, took the reed and kept hitting him on his head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe, put his clothes on him, and led him to be crucified. So again, the soldiers, they was able to, what we would call today, police brutality. Perfectly legal. And by the way, criminals didn't have rights. That's why. And so verse 32, as they were going out, they found a Cyrenian man named Simon. They forced this man to carry the cross. Now, if you remember the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said to his disciples that if someone forced you to go a mile, go 2 miles with them. Now, remember, Jesus meant that to let your light shine. That was the purpose of doing that. But this is the law that he was referring to, that the Romans could force you into service. They could force you to carry something up to a mile. And that's why Jesus said, well, go 2. Now, Jesus, no doubt, weak from the beating, the flogging, the humiliation, okay? And keep in mind that what's going on here is when you were condemned as a criminal under Rome, again, so now the intent was to humiliate you, obviously to dissuade others from committing crimes against Rome. So they would parade you and down from the judgment hall to the place where they were going to crucify you. They would parade you. People were lined along the streets. They would curse at you. They would spit on you. Some would even hit you. In some cases, yank your beard out. That was prophesied that would happen to Jesus. So it was humiliating to go through this. Now, Jesus, no doubt, weak from the flogging and the beatings. One of the things they would do is they would tie the cross beam of the cross on you, and then you would walk. Jesus obviously was so weak he couldn't. He fell down. So they forced Simon to carry his cross. Verse 33, when they came to the place called Golgotha, which means skull place, they gave him wine mixed with gall to drink. Now, this gall was a mixture that they would extract from this plant, and it was a drug. It would make the wine even more potent. And it really was, in a sense, an act of mercy, you could say, because it would get you high. It would deaden you. It would somewhat deaden the pain. Okay? And but he said, but when he tasted it, he wouldn't drink it. And after crucifying him, they divided his clothes by casting lots. And then they sat down where they were guarding him. And above his head, they put the charge against him in writing, This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Now, imagine this right here. When you were condemned as a criminal, right? So remember, Barabbas should have been here. His charge would have been insurrection, murder, right? Maybe another person would have been theft, okay? But Jesus' charge was, he's the King of the Jews. That was his criminal charge. Think about that. Verse 38, then two criminals were crucified with him, one on the right hand and one on the left. And those who were passing by were yelling at him, shaking their heads. Now, we'll get more into details with these two criminals. There's an interesting story between them, and we'll get into that in the Gospel of Luke. But understand that they were criminals. They were criminals. Verse 40, saying, the one who demolished the sanctuary and rebuilt it in 3 days, save yourself if you are the Son of God. Come down from the cross. Now remember, these are the same people, by the way, that Jesus ministered to, that he healed. And now they're mocking him. Okay, verse 41. In the same way the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, said, he saved others, but he cannot save himself. He is the King of the Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe him. He hath put his trust in God. Let God rescue him now, if he wants him. For he said, I am God's son. Now, I want to read something, because right at this point right here, the Pharisees were fulfilling prophecy. They were fulfilling prophecy that condemned them, that identified them as enemies of God. And in Psalm 22, now this, I want you to see this right here. Now remember I said that they were fulfilling prophecy also by, Matthew said they were fulfilling prophecy when they took the 30 pieces of silver and bought the potter's field. Think about that. And they knew the scriptures. They know the scriptures. Remember, one of the things the Pharisees were good at, in some cases they could memorize, they could quote entire books. Look at verse 7. Everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and shake their heads. He relies on the Lord. Let him rescue him. Let the Lord deliver him, since he takes pleasure in him. Right? So now we see them saying these similar words right here. Notice I'm going to read a couple other things from Psalm, because literally several scriptures in here we're going to see play out right here. Verse 1, my God, why hast you forsaken me? Look at verse 16. They pierced my hands and my feet. That's the crucifixion. Verse 18 we just read. They divided my garments among them, and they cast lots for my clothing. Now, as a Pharisee, by the way, since they knew the scriptures, as you know, watching this, they certainly should have said, "Oh man, this is for real." But of course, you know, the hardness of their hearts. And of course, think about it. If you know, you can be meticulously on preserving, taking, not using blood money, that you frame the person for a lie, false witness, and then you're going to be meticulously thinking you're fulfilling the law by buying blood field. They certainly, their hearts are even harder with this. Verse 44, in the same way, even the criminals who were crucified with him kept taunting him. And from noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over the whole land. Look at all these signs you see right here, by the way. These signs, the 3 hours of darkness. Verse 46, about 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Now we read that again, fulfilling the prophecy in Psalm. Verse 47, when some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling for Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, fixed it on a reed, and offered him to drink. Now this was to quench his thirst. He probably was dehydrated, and it had no gall in it, so it had no drug in it. Jesus refused to drink the one with the drug. And one of the things, by the way, is that remember back in chapter 26, when he's praying, that he's tasting the full wrath of God with no drug, no deadening of his senses. Verse 49, but the rest said, let us see if Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus shouted again with a loud voice and gave up his spirit. So at this point, Jesus died. Verse 51, suddenly the curtain of the sanctuary was split in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked and the rocks were split. The tombs were also opened, and many bodies of the saints were fallen asleep, were raised. And they came out of the tombs after its resurrection and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now, I just want to say a quick word about this, verses 52 and 53. We're not going to linger on it. And the reason why is because there's no explanation. This is controversy in that, did this actually happen? And some will argue that maybe a zealous scribe inserted this in here, and that some way during the process, and we'd have to get into that process another time, the writing, the copying of manuscripts. Okay, I'm not going to deal with it only because no other reference of this happening appears anywhere else in Scripture. So there's nothing else to say that this actually happened, that dead saints came out of the tomb after the resurrection and appeared to many. It just, so we're going to move on. Okay. Verse 54, when the centurion and those with them who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they were terrified and said, this man really was the Son of God. So it kind of gives this breath. Interesting that, by the way, that it is, again, Gentiles who are kind of testifying to Jesus being the Son of God. Many women who had, verse 55, many women who had followed him from Galilee and ministered to him were looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Joseph. This would be Jesus' mother, by the way. Interesting that they no longer refer to him as Jesus' mother. The relationship is now forever changed. And the mother of Zebedee's sons. And when it was evening, a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph came, who himself had become a disciple of Jesus. He approached Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Then Pilate ordered that it be released. So Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean, fine linen, and placed it in a new tomb, which he had cut into a rock. He left after rolling a great stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary and the other Mary were seated there facing the tomb. Now, we don't know if this was Mary, Lazarus' sister, or Mary, the mother of Jesus. Verse 62, the next day, which followed the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, Sir, we remember that while this deceiver was still alive, he said, after 3 days I will rise again. Therefore, give orders that the tomb be made secure unto the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal him away. And steal him and tell the people, he hath been raised from the dead. Then the last deception would be worse than the first. You have a guard of soldiers, Pilate told them. Go make it as secure as you know how. And they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting the guard. Now, again, dark, grim. There was really no celebrating for this Sabbath, by the way, with his disciples and with Mary and them. So from Friday, now this is really, if you kind of go back from Mary's standpoint, Joseph would have went in before sundown Friday and asked for the body of Jesus. And Pilate would have given him permission. They would have took the body down, wrapped it, buried it. And basically what they was going to do, they did sort of like a temporary sort of burial thing. They were going to put in the grave, and then after the Sabbath, they were going to come and complete the sort of embalming. Not embalming that they did with kings and stuff, but kind of burial. And so then they rested. All right, so we'll pick this up at chapter 28 next time, and we'll see you then.